First off, I want to start off this video with saying, yes, I actually did make this video about 4.5 years ago, but as we know, with time, things do change. Now, what doesn't change is that some of these MMOs are still in one way or the other, still dead. But as the years pass more and more, MMOs find themselves in the grave. That grave seems to be larger this time around, maybe because either MMOs are no longer that flavor of the month that they used to be, or fans are tired of being let down by the huge expectations of some of the titles over the years. Or maybe even it's just MMOs require too much time to invest into them, and you know, as fans get older, as you guys get older and myself, we have less time to put towards them. Whatever the reason is, there's still a good amount of older MMOs that people haven't heard of or they have forgotten about, so that is why I want to put together an updated list of some of the best dead MMOs that people should give a try to in the future. Side note, I actually feel like I could probably add most of the MMOs that have been stuck in early access for over 5 years, because who knows if people will actually want to even try them out when they get an actual release, if they ever do. Oh, and also, no, Chronicles of Illyria is not on this list because that game died before it ever knew what a bug was. Okay, enough of the jokes and more of the reminiscing. ASHERON'S Call was one of the first 3D MMOs to launch back in 1999. It had a focus on PvP that involved the risk of losing your items when you died, which was kind of standard for MMOs up until the mid-2000s. ASHERON'S Call was a very large sandbox MMO with 6 races, yet there were no classes. And that's something that was also kind of first on the board for this MMO, which ultimately meant that you would spec your points into different attributes as you leveled up. But we know that at this point from several different MMOs. Being that the world was open to explore, PKing would happen a lot with certain guilds fighting each other, players partying up to tackle dungeons, and a lot more. One of the intriguing parts about ASHERON'S Call was that the spells and the magic of abilities were to be found by trial, which kept players with unfortunately limited internet resources at the time trying different formulas until success. ASHERON'S Call was definitely not for the weak, but it was open to people with an imagination. Role-playing happened, friends were formed, but unfortunately, Warner Brothers dispersed a family back in 2017, and that family was the ASHERON'S Call family. I actually watched a couple of videos of the server closing, and it actually almost made me tear up. It was quite sad. But now we know that there are a couple of emulators for both of the ASHERON'S Calls. So if you wanted to go check them out, or you used to play but you forgot about the game, definitely give those a look. Vanguard Saga of Heroes was originally created by Sigil Games Online, and then later developed by Sony Online Entertainment, or as we know, SEO, where it saw a release back in January of 2007. This game's history is actually quite influential for the MMO industry. Brad McQuaid was one of the top executives at SEO, and Jeff Butler also worked at SEO, left together to create Sigil Games Online, which was creating Vanguard at the time. If you aren't aware of the story already, you might have already drew a little bit of a connection. That being, McQuaid left SEO to make his company Endgame, a game that was later on developed by the same company that he left, being SEO. Well, yes, that happened, and in between that happening, actually quite a lot occurred. McQuaid was able to draw 30 to 40 million in funding from Microsoft for the development of the game, but at the time, World of Warcraft was rising, and Microsoft was looking for a similar MMO, so they went and funded Vanguard. McQuaid and Microsoft didn't end up seeing eye to eye, so McQuaid actually was able to partner up with SEO, like I said in the beginning, for further funding of Vanguard. If this isn't already looking quite bad, well, it actually does get worse. The staff got ready for beta testing for Vanguard, and well, yeah, you probably could have guessed it, things didn't look too good. But the developers ignored the bad criticism, and they ended up releasing their game a couple of weeks after World of Warcraft's Burning Crusade expansion. Now, at this point, McQuaid had pretty much stopped showing up to the office, and the subscribers dropped below 100,000. SEO decided to buy the rest of the shares of Sigil Games and help bring the game back. This being the first try by SEO, which was a foot in the right direction, but they were eventually forced to put the game into a free-to-play transition. SEO put more staff to help create new content, but in the end, well, you guessed it, it saw its end in 2014. McQuaid is actually leading a new team for a new game called Pantheon, if you're unaware of it. And that's for a different video, so depending on who you're asking, there's good things and bad things to say about McQuaid. But about this game, there is actually an emulator for the game, and I believe it's got its community. So if you're looking to hop back in or give it a try, go check it out. Dark Age Camelot, what many believe to be the king of the PvP MMOs, or if you're asking certain people, of the older MMOs. Nonetheless, it focused around PvP, and to a degree that no other MMO really has seen or even been close to mastering since it came out. This was Mythic Entertainment's first real MMO, and a success it was. For those who have played Warhammer Online and not Dark Age Camelot, the PvP is pretty much similar, but it's kind of with an extra step. It has an extra realm, so it's realm versus realm versus realm instead of realm versus realm. This actually made balancing a lot easier. The game still had PvE elements, but they wanted to keep people focused on fighting for the territory, and for them to come back together with the people of their faction and win fights as one. Hundreds, if not thousands of people could fight each other, of course not without optimization issues, especially back in those days, but incredible fights for long periods of time definitely occurred. It didn't have the best graphics, players weren't fiending to defeat their dungeons, but players wanted to craft the best items and beat the other realms in PvP to show them that they were the best. The game did well, having its own kind of niche spot within the genre, but with Mythic ending up developing Warhammer and the lore behind that title, Dark Age Camelot lost its population over time and the resources from Mythic itself. Over time, it became dated, but somehow it did keep a community, and it even outlived its predecessor, Warhammer Online. The game is now run by Broadsword Online Games, which implemented a progression server for players to return to and play as content is rolled out. There are other free-to-play private servers that I've looked up that you can find and that are kind of closer to the original game's release, so give those a look. Wildstar, the MMO that could be said to be probably the biggest failure of the genre. Hundreds of millions of dollars put into the game, and it didn't even make it to its 5th birthday. The game had everything that a veteran MMO player wanted, what a non-MMO player could be excited for, and anywhere in between to be hyped about. But the game turned out to be about half of what the expectations of what Carbine and NCSoft were marketing it as. They suffered a similar fate that Cyberpunk 2077 actually had. Money was put in some of the wrong areas and potentially at the wrong times. They were offering something for everyone: 40-man raids for the PvE crowd, battlegrounds, arenas, and war plots, which were the 30 versus 30 fortress fights for the PvPers, items that you can find throughout the world and in weird spots for the explorers, and there was professions for the crafters. But unfortunately, the pizzazz wasn't really there. The optimization in PvP wasn't great. The combat also felt a bit bland for PvPers and maybe just in general, or maybe that was just me, I don't know, could be you too. The war plots were being thrown by certain guilds for rewards. Housing was cool, but it didn't really feel that lively because you were in your own instance, and ultimately, the world just kind of felt dull. The environments didn't have much identity, and the questing, that didn't really help because it was kind of just more of the same. The one thing that they did do pretty well was the raiding, but even then, some of the raids were so difficult that it made the raiders quit. The raiding was one of the things that kept people playing, but it didn't do enough for the entire player base to keep coming back, so eventually Wildstar did bite the dust. NCSoft and Carbine called it quits in November of 2018. It is sad to see a AAA huge MMO die like that, but things happen. You can still play on, I believe there might be a couple private servers, but I know there's at least one I saw on Reddit. So I'll leave the link in the description to it, and if it, fancies your taste, go give it a try. Star Wars Galaxies released back in June of 2003. It was developed by Sony Online Entertainment, once again, and it was published by LucasArts. It started off as a success as Fans of the IP enjoyed being able to immerse themselves within the Star Wars universe, and also MMO fans enjoyed the MMO with a pretty different approach to it. At launch, the game had no classes, so as the player leveled up, they would gain points to spec into different attributes and abilities, allowing the player to create a full character that they felt was unique within the Star Wars universe. People could sell whatever they found throughout the world to other players. Those who wanted to be medics could do so. If you wanted to fly your ship around and travel to different planets, you could do that. You could play how you wanted to. And for the fans of the IP, role players, and MMO fans, everyone pretty much enjoyed it. Until the development took the turn and the game kind of went into a more casual route, with several updates because of the popularity of World of Warcraft. A grind was introduced. It gave players something that became a necessity that they didn't have before. Nowadays, that is pretty standard, but the game was far more free-flowing at the time. It wasn't long until another update came to the combat, and not once, but two of them actually to the combat, that drew a lot of the players away, leaving the game quite empty. It had 2 really great years under its belt, but after 2005, the next 6 years were pretty much downhill, and with Star Wars The Old Republic getting ready to release, Star Wars Galaxies was shut down. The game to this day has multiple emulators for those who want to recreate their old characters or maybe venture into the game for the first time. City of Heroes, the superhero MMO that pretty much put superhero MMOs on the map. Launching in April of 2004 for North America, the launch was actually pretty smooth and it gained a lot of traction to having over 100,000 subscribers after the second week. The game introduced large updates pretty consistently that would introduce new zones, dungeons, arenas, storylines, and more. They had 26 large patches over its time as a game. And although I didn't play it in its early days, seeing a patch come only 2 months after release that introduced a max level increase and new zones is actually quite intriguing for an MMO fan. Nonetheless, the MMO was quite popular for a long time, but after legal issues with Marvel and other superhero MMOs releasing throughout the years, the game's popularity slowly started to dwindle. Honestly, this is probably one of the more, I guess you could say, hopeful endings out of all of these titles on the list, because the community really came together to keep the game alive after its doors were shut down in 2012. Now I know we've been talking about private servers for a lot of other games, but they had, we're talking tens of thousands of people trying to get this game back up after I believe a code was given out so that private servers can be put up. So there's actually quite a lot of private servers for this game. So you can see that the community is definitely there. I actually think it's probably still the most popular superhero MMO, despite in a way it's not actually technically being a live game. So if you want to go check them out, there's probably 10 of them out there. Go give them a look. Warhammer Online, the game that I played back during its live version a good amount, and I've actually been playing the private server since its launch, kind of on and off and pretty casually. Launching back in 2008, the game saw early success with over 1 million pre-orders, but it quickly took a hit after the Wrath of the Lich King expansion from World of Warcraft launched just a couple months after Warhammer's release. On top of that, the game was littered with bugs and optimization issues, especially with the large amount of players in the open world PvP. EA pushed the release about a year too early, which should have been spent to clearing up the issues before its release, which ended up being a large part of its demise in the end. EA pretty much ran the game into the ground themselves through the years by half-assing their free-to-play transition, not delivering tons of new content for the game after its release, and having a lot of balancing issues that just kind of went on and on. Just like the rest of these games on the list, it was not perfect by any means, but the community cared a lot about the game, and that is why it has a pretty large community playing the Return of Reckoning private server. If you enjoy open world PvP with tons of people battling, instance-based PvP, and ranked PvP, then this game is a must try, but it also has PvE. People don't really do a whole lot of the PvE on the server, but like I said, if you're focused on PvP, this game is probably a must try for you. Alright, there you have it. These games have seen a lot through the years, but they are still kicking in some way. These games will forever be remembered by their communities, and I highly suggest checking out at least one of them if they strike your interest, because there is a good chance that you'll enjoy yourself with them and probably the community as well. So check some of these private servers out. If you guys are playing any of these private servers, let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.